Hi, welcome to the Yarnell School of Fine Art. Glad you could join me again today. We're going to have a great time as promised. We're going to start a brand new painting. It is going to be an experience. In the next 4 lessons, I guarantee you, you're going to learn a lot of things, okay? Now, this is going to be a lesson that many of you have written or called or emailed us and requested, and like I said before, one of my main jobs now in the next thousands of shows hopefully, is to try to answer everybody's questions, do subjects, techniques, and all kinds of things so that every one of you get a little taste of your own interest. But whatever it is, everyone needs to paint. Whatever we do on the show, it's good lesson material. Now, what we're going to do here, I'm going to give you a little theory, a little talk first before we start this particular painting. We're going to work a little bit more on the impressionistic side. Now, we talked a little bit about this in our last painting, but this is going to be an actual impressionistic painting. We've had hundreds of you, hundreds literally, call and write and want to know, hey, how do you paint Impressionism? First, remember this. All paintings are born out of impressionistic techniques. All right, you start with loose underpaintings, as you know we do. It's how you refine the painting, whether you go ahead and call it like a super realism or realism or whatever you want to call it. And so what we're going to do in this painting is kind of stay right in the true form of Impressionism. Now let's think about what Impressionism means. The word Impressionism, if you think about it, is just an impression. Give the idea of something. So when we paint up here, instead of taking a tree like that we've got sketched here and putting every little leaf in place and every little limb, we suggest it. We just create the impression of a tree against a light blue background, or the impression of a hill or a mountain, or the impression of some flowers, or impression of some rocks. We're going to have a whole wide variety. This is going to be a simple landscape. We're going to use some of our imagination, some things I've thought of. I brought some photographs also to work on. And so we're going to sort of make a composite out of this. And another thing about Impressionists, we normally use more vivid brush strokes as part of the, you might say, the atmosphere of the painting. Instead of all these little brushes and all the little tiny twigs and limbs and branches, we use bigger strokes that are connected with the proper color schemes and value systems. And I guarantee you, once you get a handle on a good impressionistic technique, it improves all of your painting techniques, okay? Now, as I mentioned, we're going to start with a simple landscape. That's the best way to do this, although this could become complicated if you choose to. Now, these are some photographs, and we've worked from these before. This is Woodward Park in the community where I live. It's a beautiful park with all of the azaleas, the trees, the rocks, the pathways, shadows and grasses and water and just all kinds of things, reflections. So there's a good variety. I'm going to use a little bit of all. There's a couple of old fences. Here's this pathway and some big tree trunks. There's some great things in here that we can use. This is great material for impressionistic painting, okay? So you can see here all of these photographs. We're going to kind of put several of them together to create this painting. We're going to start first with a simple sky, and let's go down to our palette now. Nothing really changes in terms of our colors. Our technique is just going to be what changes the most. Now before we start, let's take a little bit of gesso. And let's go ahead and scoop some out here on our palette. Probably be a good idea to get quite a bit out there. Now we're going to use our number 10 bristle brush. Now what you're going to do here, this time, is just take the white and some alizarin crimson. And let's go up here to our palette. Now I want you to notice something. Notice how the paint goes on thick and quick. I don't sit there and smooth and blend. Now you do want to work out hard edges. This is the horizon color. Come back and reload. You don't do as much mixing when you do the impressionistic style of painting. Notice I mixed kind of right on the canvas. And it's not even important in some cases that you even cover the canvas completely. Now sometimes you can use impressionistic styles on parts of the painting and then focus in. I know a lot of artists, some well-known artists, who use that technique where they will really focus on like just the person's face or a flower or a crystal vase or something, but the background just scattered, loose paint like this. But if you know how to do it, then you're in good shape. Now notice this. This is going to drive somebody to be crazy. But notice all the movement and the brush strokes. That's what you want in Impressionism, okay? Don't be afraid of it. I'm just painting down to the edge where my tree was, or trees were. Now as I go up, I keep adding the gesso, and this time I'm just going to use plain ultramarine blue in the gesso because I want a real clean upper sky. And I just want to work this in like this. And I'm just going to sort of, see how I blend them together? Just loose and free. Now, I don't want anyone to misunderstand. We do blend. You see how I'm blending these two together? I just don't sit there and smooth it. Okay, I want the movement of the brush. I want the texture. I want the angles. And I want all of the little things going on in there. Add touches of water now and then. I'm going to come over. Across. See, I get a little dried paint in there. Once in a while, you can just leave that too. But notice how I'm working in now. You oil painters especially have fun with this too. So if you're an oil painter, this is really going to be right up your alley. All I'm doing is making sure there's no hard spots that will be a deterrent. Now let's move on across and make this a little bluer as we go across. Took me a while when I was first learning the impressionistic styles to get used to the idea that you didn't blend everything and make it perfectly smooth, you know. Well, that's just the way it is. You don't want to do that. See, I'm working back and forth, up and down, and I'm making sure that I don't have any hard lines. Now, that's going to sound almost contradictory when you look at all the brush strokes. There's a big difference, folks, between brush strokes that are well orchestrated and blended, working together to create eye flow, as opposed to a hard line of color that gets you in trouble, okay? All right, now we're just about done with this top part of the sky. Now, we may come back later, I'm not sure, but it's possible we'll come back later and add some clouds. But notice how I'm just quickly moving my wrist and my arm and my hand. And most impressionists seem to do better if they're standing, and I'm not saying you have to stand because that's the only way it works. That's not true. You can stand, you can sit, you can lay down, you can stand on your head, doesn't matter. Everybody has their own position that they're comfortable in. I like to stand when I'm doing looser work, sit when I'm doing tighter work. I just have a little more control, especially when I'm doing my wildlife and so forth. Now, I like this rich color, this nice pinks and peaches. There's no hard edges. I'm moving to some real deep, rich bluish colors. Now let's do some hillsides back here. When we come down, we do the same thing. We take some of the gesso, a little blue this time with a touch of purple, and a little sienna. So I don't do a lot of mixing there. I do just enough. And all we're going to do is suggest the distant value and tone here. I say I am being kind of careful to make sure my edges are soft, but I want to keep this nice glow back in there. Now, another thing about Impressionism is you use more richer colors, and I don't mean bright colors necessarily, but a lot of times you put the paint on a little thicker and it's got more pigment in it, so you have a lot of richer color that you got to work with, and that's how you get some more of these, I don't know, more you might say that real quality look to the painting. A good oil painting that's got a lot of thick paint sometimes is a whole lot more exciting to look at than something that's real smooth. And that's the only disadvantage to acrylic painting sometimes. It flattens out when it dries because the water evaporates out and it just sort of lays flat. So this is a fun technique. All right, now, once we've established these two things, and notice they're pretty rough and fairly loose, and that's the way we're going to leave it. Yes, we may come back and add clouds or highlights to some of the mountains, I'm not sure. But we're going to lay in our first layer of distant trees now. We're going to go back down here and take a little bit of blue, add a little bit of the hooker's green, and a little bit of purple. We're going to create a greenish gray. Now it has to be slightly darker than the sky. Now all the rules still apply. Nothing changes. But we take the green, the purple, and a little blue. Okay. And we make sure, yep, that's pretty close. Now you see I'm dry brushing in. Now this is where the impressionistic style technique will kind of frustrate some of you if you're used to real refined work. See, I'm being loose and free, letting some of the background come through and blend in. You kind of just create the suggestion of your trees there. And we'll come back and now we're going to do refinement work. I don't want anyone to misunderstand. You don't just put stuff in here and leave it without going back and completing it. So even an impressionist has to go back and do the refinement work that they are supposed to do. Now very quickly, this is where you start thinking about your light and your dark contrast, the sunlight and so forth. I think in this particular painting we'll have the sunlight coming in from the left-hand side. But I want you to notice now, this is critical. Notice the very loose, rough, impressionistic style on the edges of the trees. That's very different than what a lot of you are used to, where sometimes we take a smaller brush and we come up here and we're careful. Okay, you don't want to do that. Now I am going to take my number 4 flat sable. And down here in the same color, I'm going to add a little bit of purple to it. Maybe a little sienna. And we'll put in a couple of trunks. Again, these are real simple and quick. Now we're going to add some more leaves to those later, but I want you to get just a couple of 3 trunks right in here. Okay. Now that sort of opens up. You can see a little distance between the background and the foreground. Now we're going to start putting a little sunshine on the hillside back here, which will separate this from the background, and there will be an area in between those two. And it's sort of a middle background, if you will. Now, for that, I'm going to use my phthalo yellow-green. I'm going to switch to my number 6 bristle brush. And again, the paint's going to go on relatively thick, so you take the green, the white, and the little yellow. It's a real bright, cheerful color, and you just dry brush it on like this, just kind of thick and quick. That's how it holds its form, its color. It's almost like ladling it on, if you will. See, I'm not piddling too much. Boy, this is really where the motto of the show comes in. Don't piddle, play, or putter, okay? Boy, if you piddle with an impressionistic style or technique, you're going to get in serious trouble, I guarantee you, not just for me, but the painting doesn't do well. Now, let's block in a little bit of where the road goes there. Now, we'll go down here and we're going to take white, a little orange, and that's kind of thick too. See, everything's on nice and thick. So you don't do anything real careful. And yet, this is almost sounds so contradictory. You don't do anything careful, but it's a controlled stroke. You know, it's kind of like, I like to watch some cooking shows, you know, and man, some of these people put a dash of this, a pinch of this, a little of this, a little of that, and they don't even look at it and measure it, you know. I know that it's going to come out good because I've tasted it, but they have a unique ability to be able to put a little bit of this and a little bit of that without, you know, and it seems unorganized. Well, same thing with Impressionism. You just sort of slop it all together, and then when you're finished, you can stand back and look at it, and it'll just blow you away how unique it is. Okay, now, what we're doing is we're just still underpainting. I mean, every painting still has to be underpainted, and then you come back and do the refinement work. Now we have to define the edge of this little bit of the road right there, and that can be done with a little bit of a, say a little hooker's green, a little sienna, mixed in with this gray color here. Now, most of you know that I generally underpaint everything in real dark tones, and then we come back and highlight. Well, this isn't a whole lot different than that, except that we're not doing a lot of that. We're not underpainting it completely and then highlighting. We're going to some of the strokes will be finished as we go, okay? Now, pick up a little bit of this yellow-green. I'll go on top of that. See, all I really want to do is just kind of get a very, very small ridge right there so you can see how the road turns and goes back behind. Now let's go down here and see, I don't clean my brush out too often, although I do occasionally. Now I'm going to pick up a little sienna, maybe a little red. I want to get sort of a rust color on the right-hand side. See, I'm going to come in here like this with quick, clean strokes to suggest the edge of the road here. Now, you want the green in there, but if it gets too green, then you need to go back and pick up a little bit more red, maybe a touch of sienna. I want that earthy tone in there, but notice it's loose and free, and I'm not going to worry too much about it. I just kind of blend it in here. Of course, we have a similar thing on this side, and it'll be a little darker. I just kind of play with the road right here, kind of blending some of that muck and stuff in there. This is the true impressionistic style. You just kind of, I don't know, wiggle things around, use the stroke that we've talked about before. It's a true impressionist stroke called scumbling. You just kind of scumble your brush and you create movement to get suggestions of things, and it's really exciting. Now on this left-hand side, we'll just go ahead, take a little sienna, add a touch of purple to it. Might add a little more sienna. You want the sienna and the purple to be fairly dominant, and it's got to be darker than the right-hand side. This is the shadowed side of the road. There's a little drop off here, so you just kind of put it on there nice and thick and quick. See how loose and free everything is? That's the way we want it to be, okay? Very, very important. Now, we're going to bounce back and forth. Now, another beautiful thing about Impressionism is you don't want to spend a lot of time in one area. You're going to notice that we'll leave the trees for a while, we leave the sky, we just move around and kind of get our version of the underpainting done. Then we come back and refine the strokes that we feel like are not working, or the value system, or the color scheme is off, or some of the negative space. All right, for instance, I want to have a little control now over the space in the foreground, so I'm going to switch, or the middle ground, back to my number 10 bristle brush. And right in the area right there, we're going to make that a little darker. So I'm going to take the green. Now I'm always using a little white in here, and the purple, a little sienna. Take a test here. Yeah, it looks good. And what I want you to do is just dry brush this on, but kind of in a scumbling fashion. And then after you get a little bit of this on there, then we switch back to a little phthalo yellow, green, and white. And you see how many different steps there are and why this is a little more complicated than you might realize. I'm going to kind of accent this. We're going to build on the premise of contrast. That's one of the first things they teach you in any kind of art school or wherever you get basic training. You know, contrast is what makes a painting stand apart. See that light contrast against the dark? That gives you form and feeling, and it separates subjects or objects and makes the painting come alive. Okay? And just like right now, I'm building just basic underpainting, and some of this I may just leave, because that's the impressionistic way. You get your eye to follow whatever you want it to follow, and then the rest is just sort of left alone. I want a vertical grass effect, so I'll use a vertical stroke. See? And it will be real loose, but look how exciting that is and how it's got a real good feel to it. Now we add a little more darker color, this time a little more green, a little sienna, just a skosh of purple. Yeah, I got a little too much purple as usual. We go here. And see how that nice little dark and light contrast was paying off? Just so exciting. Then we'll put a tree trunk right there, and then we'll end up putting more leaves on it, and everything just starts falling in place. We'll get some nice rocks, and probably put some water in here, and then the flowers at the end, and this painting will just absolutely glow with excitement, enthusiasm. And it's one of those kind of paintings where you can just add things if you have good skill in color mixing and color theory. And then you can, accent it to fit your particular home or your decor or someone else's, because these kind of tones here are pretty basic. And like, for instance, if you like a lot of pinks, well, you could finish with pink flowers or mauve or white or red flowers, and really give it the accent to hang it wherever you want to hang it. Okay, now here's an interesting little spot right here on this corner. I'm going to go ahead and pull up like this, just some grass, kind of like a bush there. See that little dark against the light? Now, this is where we have to start using good judgment as a painter. Now, where we have this dark and light contrast, I'm looking at that now and saying, okay, yeah, that's what I want, but I want this to be a little lighter. So this is then where you come in, maybe with a smaller brush, and you say, okay, now I'm going to lighten that up. So I take the brush and I rinse it out good. This is where you want to paint a little bit cleaner. Take the white and a little smidgen of orange. And now you will do the refinement. This is, for an impressionist, refinement is just putting a stroke of color and leaving it and seeing what it looks like. And if it doesn't work, you hit it again. See, I just pull that right around, opening that up, giving it a little sunlight. See, I can go in here even right now and just suggest even rock formations, just a quick touch. Generally, an impressionist tries to make every stroke count. And I guess that's what somebody pulled their hair out, because if that stroke didn't work and you just keep working it, sometimes it just turns to mud and you got to start all over. I fully understand that. I mean, we've all been there. I have a feeling every single one of you have, at some point in time, or maybe several times, have just worked a painting until it just turned to mud and you just want to pull your hair out. You don't want to do that. Okay? That's not a good thing. Now then, we're playing with the road. We keep coming forward. We want to make it look loose and rough, and I don't want to get so detailed with this that we lose the freshness of Impressionism. 90% of all the awards that I have won over the years, and I'm not just talking about bragging, I've won many, many awards. 90% of them almost were done with more impressionistic effects. Almost all the paintings that win awards these days seem to have a looser, freer style, okay? Not that there's anything wrong with any of the other styles, because I prefer to do more detailed work, but I like this too. All right, now let's move over here to the other side. Now on this side, we just put in a few dry brush background trees, as you can see there. We need to do a similar thing over here, and they can be a similar color, but we need some different shapes. So let's take our number 10 bristle brush, and working right back down here in the same pile with a little of the white or the gesso. I'm using the gesso here. Touch purple, and you'll see that's kind of a grayish tone. Let's see. Yeah, that's about right. See, it's a little softer and lighter. All I want you to do here is just do this. Just dry brush them in. Like this. Now right here is one of those tall trees that looks kind of like I think it's kind of like a poplar tree. But see, I'm just kind of smudging it in. put the paint on there and kind of give it its shape, it will set right on this ridge right here. But see how loose that is? I'm not worried about it just yet. And there might be a couple of small ones back here, but see how quick and loose that goes on? I'm creating the impression, folks. Now let's keep that word in mind. I'm creating the impression, and that's all, of trees, rocks, water, sky, and clouds. I'm not trying to create a photographic representation. That's a big difference, okay? So keep that in mind. Come on over here. Already, look at this. Isn't this a great effect, this little area right in through here? I just think it's marvelous. Now, let's keep moving. And also the secret, I have to keep saying, one of the things that does remain the same is that you want to keep all your edges soft. Now again, this is still just underpainting, but every time you add an object or a subject, with the exception of this edge right here where I didn't soften and probably should have, you want to keep your edges very subtle and soft so that when you come back and put your next layer of light or whatever, you don't have to contend with a hard line because it's so hard to cover it up. Now here again is a kind of an interesting spot where I can excuse me, throw in a little bit of light and dark. And folks, we're going to be running out of time here. You've already given me the signal that we're about to. So I want to remind you before we end here, what I'd like for you to do is practice your strokes, even if you have to practice on another canvas. But at least get your painting this far. And then practice dry brushing and creating these rough, loose strokes. Stand back and look at it from a distance. Remember, the average viewing distance for any painting, but especially for an impressionistic type painting, is approximately 6 feet, about the length of your body. So as you put the strokes on, stand back and look at it, okay? Well, I hope you've enjoyed this show. We're going to spend the next 3 sessions now finishing up this beautiful impressionistic landscape. I guarantee you it will be a great lesson for you, all right? Well, stay inspired, keep painting, and I guarantee you we're going to see you right here again real soon on another Yarnell School of Fine Art.